Students, studying psychology is fascinating, but also challenging. There is so much to learn about psychology, from learning about the theories to behavior, mental illness, or therapy. This course is packed with a lot of facts and the different facets of psychology. Psychology is a vast field, with its history running back to the times 600 to 300 BC. There is a lot of information about the field in general in this course, so that you can make the most of your time here. I hope that you will learn a lot and that you'll enjoy the course and the journey with me. Let me discuss the course objectives with you. By the end of this course, I want you to have an understanding of what psychology is about. You must know what function it serves in society and the ways the brain has an influence on people's behavior in different ways. In addition, you must know how important child development is and the major theorists who played a role in developing theories of development. Module 2 of this course addresses cognitive functions and processes of the brain that impact on behavior, and it's imperative that you understand how these processes happen. Lastly, you will learn about abnormal psychology in the form of psychological disorders. Let us commence your course in psychology. Students, this is officially the start of your first lesson for your course diploma in psychology. The title for today's lesson is What is Psychology? Students, today's lesson has 3 core objectives. Firstly, I shall describe the field of psychology to you. Secondly, we shall discuss the history of psychology. And finally, I shall introduce you to the major schools of thought in psychology. Students, I also have a surprise for you. Starting in lesson 2, I will start teaching you a practical therapy skill to apply to your own life and the lives of others. There will be 3 practical therapy skills taught in total, so they will span over lessons 2, 3, and 4. I want to reiterate to you that this course will not qualify you to become a psychologist, but it will give you a deeper understanding of the field with key insights into each facet of the field. You will also gain some valuable practical skills in psychology. And finally, this course will help you to explore the field even further with the knowledge you have gained in this course as your base. Have you ever wondered how the field of psychology became what it is today? And how has it evolved to become the field of science as we know it today? Although the field has changed a lot, some of the questions psychologists ask have remained the same. Student, these questions about psychology will all be answered in this lesson. I encourage you to start a journal about this journey you are about to embark on in psychology with me. This journal will be very helpful for you to reflect on after the course. Without any further ado, let's start our first lesson. Have you ever wondered about what psychology really is? Let us find out. Let us start at the beginning. Have you ever wondered where the word psychology came from? Well, the word psychology was formed by combining the Greek word psyche, meaning breath, principle of life, life or soul, with the word logia, stemming from the Greek word logos, meaning speech, word, or reason. The word psychology is thus linked with our psyches, the life within us, our souls and reasoning, and interacting with others through speech or words. How is psychology defined? Well, according to the American Psychological Association, psychology is defined as the study of the mind and behavior. The discipline of psychology embraces all aspects of human experience, from the functions of the brain to the actions of nations, from child development to caring for the aged, in every conceivable setting from scientific research centers to mental health care services. The understanding of behavior is the enterprise of psychologists. At this stage, you may be wondering what psychologists or registered counselors do on a daily basis. Firstly, registered counselors and psychologists all have bachelor's and master's degrees from accredited universities, and some may even have gone on to study a doctorate degree. Some psychologists and counselors offer counseling services to their clients. Some work at mental health clinics, offering specific programs to patients. Some work in a testing and advisory capacity. And then some are employed in teaching the subject of psychology. So what exactly is psychology? Remember, it is the study of the mind and how it works, and in turn, how it affects behavior in humans. Psychology is a multifaceted field of study with many subfields. In many countries, students can study to become clinical psychologists, counseling psychologists, educational psychologists, or industrial psychologists. Even though psychology is quite a new field, with most advances happening over the past 150 years, its origins can be traced back to ancient Greece from between 600 to 300 BC. In the past few years, however, the field is still evolving. Lately, many new postgraduate degrees of study have been released. Examples of new psychological fields of study include biological psychology, correctional psychology, media psychology, and engineering psychology. Most psychologists or counselors do counseling with their clients, also called psychotherapy. So what is counseling or psychotherapy? During counseling sessions, clients will present their problems to the therapist and they will talk about such problems and how the client views their problems. The counseling sessions will specifically focus on helping the client change their behaviors to move towards leading a more fulfilling life by having addressed their problems. Client problems can range from feeling overly stressed, depressed, or anxious. Many individuals who are facing difficult relational problems, such as going through a divorce, also seek the help of a therapist. However, therapists are available to help clients address any type of problem that they may encounter in their lives. Did you know that many parents take their children to therapy for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, also called ADHD? ADHD is an organic brain condition and usually treated with stimulant medication, but therapy is useful in helping the child plan and structure their daily activities, thereby establishing a routine. And in addition, it helps to educate parents about the condition and gives them tools to help their child with ADHD. Students, topics such as this one will all be discussed in this course, so keep out for the lessons on child development in this course in psychology and know that there are many more to come. Students, therapists are trained to help clients in different ways. Therefore, there are different types of psychotherapy. When clients are educated about the different therapy types available, they are more prone to choose the most suitable therapist. The most widely used therapies today include the following: cognitive behavior therapy, which focuses on the client's cognitions, or simply put, their thinking. Some clients think about their problems in a dysfunctional way, and then therapists help them to think about them differently in order to solve the problem. Person-centered therapy entails the therapist helping the client to reach their full potential by accepting them fully and not judging them for making their own decisions. Narrative therapy focuses on the client's story, and therapy aims to help the client write a new story for their lives, thereby establishing change. Psychoanalysis, which was founded by Sigmund Freud, focuses a lot on clients' unconscious processes and childhood hurts to help them recover in the here and the now. And finally, marriage and family therapy, which focuses on the family as a system, with a problem being embedded in the system, not being the fault of only one person. Students, for the sake of this first lesson in psychology, I feel that I want to give you a brief history of the field of psychology. Let us move on to that. Let us start this next section of our lesson, the history of the field of psychology. Psychology had been a branch of philosophy until the mid-1800s, after which it developed as an independent and scientific discipline in Germany and the United States. These philosophical roots played a large role in the development of the field. You may be wondering who the famous philosophers were and what they contributed to the psychology field as we know it today. Let us take a quick look at how it all started, from the field of philosophy, which led to the field of psychology eventually. It all seems to have started during the period between 600 to 300 BC, when Greek philosophers started exploring topics related to what we now consider to be part of the field of psychology. For example, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle investigated and wrote about topics such as pleasure, pain, knowledge, motivation, and rationality. So you may be wondering what else the famous philosophers discussed or wondered about. They wondered about whether human traits are innate, such as inherited through our genes, or whether these are products of experience or the environment, which is still a topic of discussion and research today, known as the nature versus nurture debate. These early philosophers also considered the origins of mental illness, with both Socrates and Plato focusing and hypothesizing about psychological forces being the root of such mental illness. You've just heard about Socrates. Do you know about him? Socrates was an ancient Greek philosopher whose way of life, his character and thought had a profound influence on Western philosophy. Socrates was known for his conversations, discourses and questions he asked about philosophy and life. Let us consider Socratic questioning, which developed as a result of his conversations, still in use today. Socrates had a profound talent, that of arguing and communicating, specifically about truth and justice. Therefore, the most noteworthy contribution to Western philosophy was Socrates' technique for arguing a point, known as the Socratic technique, from which Socratic questioning derived. In Socratic questioning, an issue would be divided into a series of questions in which the responses would progressively lead to the desired outcome, or answers to such questions posed. In the times we are experiencing these days, we still have many questions. Socrates would say, that's fine, but have you properly identified the problems worth solving? He basically implies that we cannot solve problems properly if we don't ask the correct questions to solve these problems. Jacob Needleman, a professor of philosophy at San Francisco State University, quotes that, our culture has greatly tended to solve its problems without experiencing its questions. He further states that experiencing questions means to sit with them, rather than rushing to devise a solution, or consulting an app, as we so like to do these days. Socratic questioning is a disciplined and thoughtful dialogue between two or more people, and it is widely used in teaching and counseling practices to expose and unravel deeply held values and beliefs that frame and support what we think and say. So let me give you a few examples of Socratic questions as part of the history of psychology. Question number 1 states that, what do you mean when you say this? Or what do you mean when you say that? And secondly, an elaboration on that question is, could you further explain that point? This is an example of clarification in terms of Socratic questioning. Questions 3 and 4 are about challenging assumptions, with question 3 asking whether there is a different point of view, and question 4 asking about the assumptions that are being made and asking the person to elaborate on that point. Question 5 asks, how would this affect the other person? And question 6 asks, what are the long-term implications of this? And these question types fall under implications and consequences. When engaging in Socratic questioning, each party should be fully engaged, equally participating, and the environment must be non-threatening and all-accepting, so that each person feels free to ask the questions they want answers for. I want to show you a short video clip of a popular psychologist today and how he talks about what we want in life, and linking it to asking questions about what we want. He basically makes the point that if we don't have that which we want in life, we haven't asked for it. And also, do we know what questions to ask to get what we want? Let's watch Dr. Jordan Peterson in action.
Sit on your bed one day and ask yourself, what remarkably stupid things am I doing on a regular basis to absolutely screw up my life? And if you actually ask that question, but you have to want to know the answer, right? Because that's actually what asking the question means. It doesn't mean just mouthing the words. It means you have to decide that you want to know. You'll figure that's out so fast it'll make your hair curl. There's no better pathway to self-realization and the ennoblement of being than to posit the highest good that you can conceive of and commit yourself to it. And then you might also ask yourself, and this is definitely worth asking, is, do you really have anything better to do? And if you don't, well, why would you do anything else? If you orient yourself properly, and then pay attention to what you do every day, that works. And I actually think that that's in accordance with what we have come to understand about human perception, because what happens is that the world shifts itself around your aim, because you're a creature that has an aim. You have to have an aim in order to do something. You're an aiming creature. You look at a point and you move towards it. It's built right into you. And so you have an aim. Well, let's say your aim is the highest possible aim. Well then, so that sets up the world around you. It organizes all of your perceptions. It organizes what you see and you don't see. It organizes your emotions and your motivations. So you organize yourself around that aim, and then what happens is the day manifests itself as a set of challenges and problems, and if you solve them properly, then you stay on the pathway towards that aim, and you can concentrate on the day, and so that way you get to have your cake and eat it too, because you can point into the distance, the far distance, and you can live in the day. And it seems to me that that makes every moment of the day supercharged with meaning. That's how, because if everything that you're doing every day is related to the highest possible aim that you can conceptualize, well, that's the very definition of the meaning that would sustain you in your life.
Students, in this video, Dr. Peterson started his video or speech with asking questions about your life. This discussion led to how one can find meaning in your life. Can you see how important it is not to go through life being blind to what we want or need? And how to get that what you want or need is by starting to ask the questions. And those questions are often hard or difficult questions. Let us move on with our lesson and consider those who are considered to be the founders of the field of psychology. The field of psychology was first formally viewed as a science in its own right when Wilhelm Wundt started his first psychological laboratory in Leipzig in 1879. Wundt was interested in studying the mind and conscious experiences. He reported that a process of rigorous introspection could be useful to report the works of the inner consciousness. Let us consider introspection. Introspection is a term that has come a long way and is still in use today. So what is introspection? Introspection is known to be a technique used to describe and analyze one's own inner thoughts and feelings. We also use introspection to evaluate our thoughts and feelings, as well as our convictions about life, behaviors, and interactions with others. William James, an American psychologist and philosopher, was the first to teach a psychology course in the US at Harvard University and went on to teach psychology there until 1907. James is also famous because he founded one of the first psychology laboratories in the United States in 1875. He is often called the father of American psychology. James's book, The Principles of Psychology, is considered as one of the most classical and influential texts in psychology's history today. Now that I've briefly introduced you to Wundt and James, let's consider their different viewpoints. Wundt is known for structuralism, and he started in Europe. And James is known for functionalism, and he started psychology in the United States. Structuralism and functionalism will be discussed in the next section of our lesson under the major schools of thought of psychology. But let's consider Wundt and James's core beliefs first. Wundt, who developed the notion of structuralism, emphasized introspection and posed that humans then break down their mental processes into its smallest elements or structures. On the other hand, James was one of the contributors of functionalism and rejected introspection because he said it could not be measured. In turn, he focused on external events in their whole parts, also considering the impact the environment has on behavior. In other words, measuring the function of the environment in terms of behavior. I want to provide you with a quote by Jordan Peterson. Peterson quotes, "Accept the terrible responsibility of life with eyes wide open." This quote links with Wundt's idea of introspection, to look to the inside and accept responsibility. As you can see, there is a golden thread running through the field of psychology, from the early days of Wundt to today, where the likes of a person like Jordan Peterson is educating us about life and how we should live it. Students, even though the field of psychology is a few hundred years old, psychologists from back then up to now are still asking some of the same questions. The 5 key questions that I mentioned earlier and that are still under debate today include nature versus nurture, free will versus determinism, accuracy versus inaccuracy, conscious versus unconscious processing, and differences versus similarities. Let's consider each. Our first question is about nature versus nurture. What are the most influential factors in terms of who we ultimately become and the differences among individuals? Is it our genes or our environment? Most scientists have now agreed that both play a role. Interesting factors include that intelligence is highly heritable, with intelligence being 85% to 100% heritable, and extraversion is approximately 50% heritable. The next question that is still asked today is concerned with free will and determinism. Think about it. To what extent do people have control over their own actions? Are we purely products of our environments and guided by forces that are out of our control, or are we able to choose the behaviors that we engage in? That's a debatable issue. Legal systems around the world punish people who've committed crimes because they believe they made a decision to participate in a crime. And some believe that the environment still has an impact on how we engage and what we engage in and what we decide. What is your opinion? What do you think? How much does the environment influence our behaviors? And do we have free will? Let us consider accuracy versus inaccuracy. Scientists still pose the question of whether human beings are accurate in their information processing. We are believed to be accurate enough and capable enough to make sense of the world around us and to make decisions. However, human judgment is oftentimes compromised by inaccuracies in our thinking styles and by our motivations and emotions. Thinking styles that are faulty lead to many psychological problems, and that is what the subfield of cognitive psychology is all about. This question is interested in the extent to which we are conscious of our own actions and the causes of them, and on the other hand, to what extent are our behaviors caused by influences that we are not aware of. Many theories in psychology, especially the psychoanalytic theory, argue that our behavior is determined by variables that we are not consciously aware of. The final question that is still under debate today is about differences and similarities between people. Are people around the world similar or different? To what extent are men and women similar and or different? Also, are people from different ethnicities and cultures similar or are they different? Are people around the world generally the same or are they influenced by their backgrounds and environments in different ways? Psychologists who specialize in personality, social and cross-cultural psychology attempt to answer these questions. Before moving to the major schools of thought in psychology, I want to enlighten you about what is to come in Lesson 2, your next lesson in psychology. Lesson 2 will teach you about the most basic and important technical skills that therapists use in their therapy rooms. I'll also start teaching the skill of active listening for you to apply to your own life and those close to you. Active listening is not only important in the therapeutic setting, but also when one engages in communication with a loved one, a work colleague, or a friend. You will find that if one does not listen properly or attentively, one can often respond inappropriately. I hope you will start experiencing the richness and insight that it will bring to your life when applying the active listening skills I will teach you. Students, we have reached the last section of our lesson. We will now peruse the major schools of thought in psychology, together with their contributors. Let us continue. There are many subfields of psychology today, but the major schools of thought include the following: structuralism, functionalism, psychoanalysis, behaviorism, gestalt psychology, humanistic psychology, cognitive psychology. Let us start with structuralism. Let us start with structuralism and functionalism. These two theories are the two earliest psychological theories that sought to explain human behavior in different ways and to approach the study of psychology from different perspectives. In the previous part of this lesson, you learned that it was Wundt who started the development of structuralism. Functionalism was developed and introduced by William James in the US much later than structuralism was. Structuralism was the first approach to have attempted to analyze the human mind by establishing basic units within it. Structuralism sought to analyze the adult mind, defined as the sum total of experience from birth to the present, in terms of the simplest definable components, and then to find a way in which these components fit together in complex forms. The major tool of structuralist psychology was introspection, a careful set of observations made under controlled conditions by trained observers using a stringently defined descriptive vocabulary. So if we speak about the basic elements in one's mind in terms of structuralism and how they work together to fit together in complex forms, what are some examples of such elements? These elements include mental experiences, such as sensations, mental images, feelings or emotions, perceptions, and thoughts. If we think about it, we can recall each of these above elements, but they all work together for us to experience life, to get to an opinion, to have discourses with other individuals, and to have experiences as a whole. Functionalism was developed as a reaction to structuralism, which was not accepted in the US at the time. William James in the US suggested that the mind and consciousness existed for a purpose and should be the focus of study. James further proposed that psychology should be more practical rather than theoretical, as was the proposition in structuralism. Hence, functionalism was more focused on objective aspects rather than introspection. Although William James wanted to focus on consciousness, he could not find a way to objectively study it, so he focused on behavior instead, which could be studied objectively. Functionalism laid the framework for behaviorism, a theory that rests on objective measures of human behavior and on acknowledging the function rather than the structure of the human mind. Functionalists ended up criticizing structuralists for not using objectivity in their theory. Sigmund Freud was the founder of the psychoanalytic school of thought. This school of thought emphasizes the influence of the unconscious mind on behavior. Freud believed that the human mind was composed of three elements: the id, the ego, and the superego. The id consists of primary or primal urges, while the ego is the component of personality charged with dealing with reality. The superego is the part of the personality that holds all of the ideals and values we have learned from our parents and culture. Freud believed that the interaction of these three elements was what led to all humans' complex human behaviors. Let me provide you with examples concerning the id, the ego, and the superego. Remember that the id is concerned with primary needs or urges, and its main aim is to satisfy such urges. An example of operating from the id's perspective is that John walks down the street and John is very hungry. He sees that his neighbor has an apple pie cooling in the window. He only has an id, and because he's very hungry, he takes the apple pie for himself. The ego deals with reality. The ego tries to meet the needs and desires of the id in a way that is socially accepting to the world. An example of the ego operating includes Mary wanting to borrow her mother's necklace, but she knows her mother will be very angry if she takes the necklace without asking, so she asks her mother to borrow her necklace before taking it. The superego is the last part of the personality to develop and is concerned with morals and judgments about right and wrong. An example of the superego includes a scenario about the apple pie. John knows that taking the apple pie for himself is wrong because he believes that stealing is wrong. He decides in return to buy some food for himself down the road. Many therapists still use psychoanalysis today. The main goal of psychoanalysis is to bring the unconscious issues to the surface to enhance the functioning of the ego, thereby helping the individual become less controlled by biological drives or demands from the superego. How do therapists assist clients? Let's find out on the next slides. The following techniques are still in use by psychologists today in terms of psychoanalysis. Free association, such as asking the client to tell the therapist what they are thinking about at that particular moment. The therapist will then ask the client questions with regards to what's on their mind and delve deeper, making associations between all the concepts that are connected to the first thought. Psychotherapists also use dream analysis, resistance analysis, and transference analysis. Students, I will give you more information on these above-mentioned techniques in your summary notes, so keep a lookout for those. Let us move on to peruse behaviorism. The next school of thought to be addressed is the behaviorist school of thought. Behaviorism became the dominant school of thought during the 1950s. Can you remember what led to behaviorism? That's right, it was functionalism. Based on the work of psychologists such as John B. Watson, Ivan Pavlov, and B.F. Skinner, behaviorism holds that all behavior can be explained through environmental causes rather than by internal forces. Behaviorism is focused on observable behavior, and the main theories of learning include classical conditioning and operant conditioning. A great deal of research was done on these two types of learning. Behaviorism believes that conditioning by the environment may lead a person to behave in a certain way and learn in a certain way. Let us take a glance at classical and operant conditioning whilst we're busy with behaviorism. Classical conditioning is also known as Pavlovian or respondent conditioning and was discovered by a Russian physiologist, Ivan Pavlov. In short, two stimuli are linked together, and this association produces a new learned response in a person or an animal. Pavlov's experience with dogs is famous, and you may have heard about it. Pavlov learned that when pairing food with the sound of a bell when he presented dogs with their food led to the dogs salivating in response to the bell. The dogs thus associated their food with the sound of a bell and salivated when they heard the bell which is a new learned response. Classical conditioning thus involved associating an involuntary response and a stimulus. Operant conditioning is sometimes also referred to as instrumental conditioning. As you know, it is part of behaviorism, suggesting that our environment influences our behaviors and learning. Operant conditioning is a method of learning that employs rewards and punishments for behavior. Through operant conditioning, an association is made between a behavior and a consequence. Consequences and behaviors can be both positive or negative. Did you know that Skinner used the term operant to refer to any active behavior that operates in the environment, generating consequences? An example of operant conditioning is rewarding a child with an ice cream for completing a difficult task or for exhibiting good behavior in a difficult situation. Negative consequences may include punishment for bad behavior. Edward Thorndike built upon Skinner's theory and proposed the law of effect. According to the law of effect, actions that are followed by desirable outcomes are more likely to be repeated, while those followed by undesirable outcomes are less likely to be repeated. For example, a child who is punished for negative behavior is less likely to exhibit that same behavior in the future because of the punishment received. Have you ever heard of the Gestalt psychology movement? Gestalt psychology is based on the idea that we experience our worlds as unified wholes. Rather than breaking down thoughts and behaviors into their smallest elements, Gestalt psychologists believe that one must look at the whole experience of a patient. According to Gestalt thinkers, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, meaning that more emphasis should be placed on the whole, and the whole is more important in its function than the separate parts it's made up of. The Gestalt school of thought is an existential, phenomenological, and process-based approach that was created on the premise that individuals must be understood from the vantage point of the context they find themselves in at the moment. Phenomenology is based on the concept of the person's reality and what really is going on with that person at that present moment. Existentialism is grounded in the notion that people don't merely exist, but they are always in the process of becoming, evolving, and rediscovering themselves, and thereby growing as individuals. Humanistic psychology developed as a response to psychoanalysis and behaviorism. Humanistic psychology focuses on individual free will, personal growth, and self-actualization. Major humanist thinkers included Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers. Carl Rogers, a pioneer of the humanist movement, developed person-centered therapy. Let's have a look at person-centered therapy. The values of the humanistic movement are all included in person-centered therapy and include positive regard, empathy, becoming part of the client's context, being non-judgmental, and not acting as the expert of the client's life, such as with other types of therapy. According to Rogers and person-centered therapy, which is part of the humanistic school of thought, humans are basically trustworthy, and they have a vast potential for understanding themselves and resolving their own problems without direct intervention on the therapist's part. It is also believed that they are capable of self-directed growth if they are involved in a specific type of therapeutic relationship with their therapist. Rogers emphasizes the quality of the relationship between client and therapist as core determinants of the outcome of the therapeutic process. This type of therapy is in contrast with many other therapies that view the therapist's techniques as the most powerful agents of change. By trusting the client to act as his or her own agent of change through the relationship and engagements with the therapist, the client becomes the agent of change. Students, I love quotes. The famous Carl Rogers quotes, "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change." This quote lies at the heart of person-centered therapy, with the therapist being self-accepting and then teaching the client to also be self-accepting. Rogers believed that self-acceptance is one of the most important attributes to change in person-centered therapy. By unconditionally accepting the client, regardless of the therapist's own views, Rogers reiterates that it enhances empathy, which in turn enhances the therapeutic relationship, thereby creating room for change. Students, we are nearing the end of our lesson. The last school of thought to discuss is cognitive psychology. Let's move on to that. Cognitive psychology is the branch of psychology that studies mental processes, including how people think, perceive, remember, and learn. Cognitive psychology began to emerge during the 1950s, partly as a response to behaviorism. Critics of behaviorism noted that it failed to account for how internal processes impacted behavior. This period is sometimes referred to as the cognitive revolution, as a wealth of research on topics such as information processing, language, memory, and perception began to emerge. Let us finish our part on cognitive psychology. As part of the larger field of cognitive science, this branch of psychology is related to other disciplines including neuroscience, philosophy, and linguistics. One of the most influential theories from this school of thought was the stages of cognitive development theory, proposed by Jean Piaget. Piaget had an enormous impact not only on the cognitive psychology movement, but also on education, as his theory also included how children learn at different stages of their development. Students, before we finish our lesson, let us do a quick recap on what you've learned in this lesson. We started our lesson with an explanation about what psychology is about, the field's origin, and how it is multifaceted with many subfields of study. Secondly, we addressed the history of psychology, which started out with the field of philosophy, with the likes of Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates. You also learned that psychology was established as a science through the work of Wilhelm Wundt and William James. Finally, we swiftly went through the major schools of thought in psychology today. I hope you enjoyed the lesson and learned a lot.